Prior to the efforts we will discuss in Lesson 3.2, you would have worked through with your staff to develop a communication plan and also develop consensus. Moving forward, it's time to execute the plan, beginning with outlining the steps to ensure that staff and students will be trained to execute your MTSS programs. After you have identified the interventions needed, the master schedule that facilitate the intervention time, and the staff whom are best suited to teach the intervention, now it's time to provide the training. As you provide the training, consider, does the intervention require professional training? Is there a resident expert who can train other teachers? Are there interventions that are a part of the core program already in use? Does the intervention require strong instructional skills like explicit instruction? You have to entertain all these different elements and then place them into some kind of order that would be a plan to ensure that every staff member has what they need before the first day of intervention time. Just as we considered supporting teachers, we also have to consider the support for students. This is very critical because you're going to have a lot of students moving different places with interventions in most cases. And these routines have to be taught, especially if you consider early elementary that might not be used to going to another classroom for an intervention. This will work marvelously, but students have to know the routines. So if they're going to be within a new intervention, a skill that they've maybe not developed before might be rapid response and having to fire off responses in a very rapid way because the program has a certain cadence to it. There might be certain materials, like for instance in Rocket Math, that students have to know how to navigate the handouts and how to quiz other students and so on. There might be online tools that students have to learn how to navigate. There might be a peer tutoring component and they need to know the etiquette around peer tutoring. And there might be homework tasks that they need to be able to explain to their parents. So the more that students can understand the routines, the more smoothly things will go. And sometimes it could take maybe the first week of the intervention to really focus somewhat on the intervention, but more about the routine. Because once students understand the routine, they'll actually get more benefit out of the intervention. So in these consideration questions, some of this might sound very familiar, but I'll remind you that in the previous lessons we were looking at developing and then communicating. Now we have to figure out how are we actually going to do the work to make sure that both staff and students are prepared for the intervention times. So when we consider the first question, as a leadership team, take a moment and evaluate the needs and the interventions you selected. If training is needed, identify how will the training be provided. That's a really important step to think about, that we're going to start, say, on September 9th, offering a math fluency intervention. How will we make sure or ensure that everyone has what they need, both in resources and in training, to enact that intervention? Because we don't want to have a situation where we start an intervention and it goes very rough for everyone, because we don't want to lose that enthusiasm around the intervention. We want to decide what new expectations will be placed on students and how will staff teach these new expectations. So if it's going to require some students to move from room to room, what is going to be the expectation of students to be prepared to leave the room and enter the next room? What was the expected hallway behavior? All these things that you'll want to sort out ahead of time to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And also knowing that time is such a commodity that you can't have a lot of downtime as you transition from courses into interventions. And are there core expectations for all interventions that may be provided consistently school-wide? So for instance, RSTQ, restate the question. You may decide that in any intervention where students are writing, that they need to RSTQ. So that might be a school-wide strategy that all students are taught, and an expectation that all students have in all classes.